Chukchi is a river alive by Robert Macfarlane. Introduction. A child's question, a world's crisis. When Robert Macfarlane told his young son Will the title of his new book, Is a River Alive?, his son responded with delightful clarity. Well, duh, that's going to be a short book then, Dad, because the answer is yes. Children possess an intuitive understanding that the natural world is animated, alive, interconnected. But we adults have forgotten, and this forgetting has brought us to crisis. In England alone, not a single river is classified as being in good overall health. Rivers have become first undrinkable, then unswimmable, then untouchable. This isn't merely an environmental problem, it's a crisis of imagination. We have forgotten that our fate flows with that of rivers, and always has. This book is Macfarlane's answer to his son's simple truth. But as you'll discover, the answer is far from simple. It requires us to traverse continents, descend into cloud forests, witness dying waters, and ride wild rapids. Most importantly, it asks us to fundamentally reimagine our relationship with the living world. The central transformative idea at the heart of this book is this: rivers are not mere matter for human use, but living beings who should be recognized as such in both imagination and law. Part 1. The Chalk Stream. A personal river. Less than a mile from Macfarlane's home in Cambridge rises one of the few hundred chalk streams in the world, an ecosystem rarer and more fragile than cloud forest or salt marsh. 9 springs fill a hollow in the chalk, creating gin-clear water that flows to join the River Cam, then the Great Ouse, and finally the North Sea at the Wash. Macfarlane has visited these springs most weeks for 20 years. They serve as his timekeeper, friend, and lifeline. Archaeological work reveals humans have been drawn to these springs for at least 6,000 years. Mesolithic flint scatters and charred hearthstones, dated between 4000 and 6000 BCE, have been found there. In the summer of 2022, Europe's hottest on record, rivers across the continent turned to sludge. Macfarlane's beloved spring stopped flowing entirely. His son asked a haunting question. Has the water died? This chalk stream runs as a constant thread throughout the book, woven between his 3 epic journeys. It represents both the intimacy of connection to place and the vulnerability of all rivers in our warming world. The springs remind us that rivers are born. They have beginnings, lives, and yes, they can die. In Maori culture, when you meet someone new, you may be asked, "Ko wai kou?" Who are your waters? This question recognizes that we are fundamentally shaped by our rivers, that they flow through our identities as much as through our landscapes. Macfarlane's water is this fragile chalk stream, and through it, he understands what we risk losing. Part 2. The River of the Cedars. Ecuador's cloud forest. The living forest. Macfarlane's first major journey takes him to northern Ecuador, to a miraculous cloud forest called Los Cedros and its network of rivers. The expedition team is remarkable. Cesar Rodriguez Garavito, a lawyer fighting for trans-Amazonian indigenous and natural rights and founder of the Moth, More Than Human Rights Collective. Cosmo Sheldrake, a musician and field recordist whose sampled nature recordings are genuinely mind-bending. And Juliana Furci, a mycologist with an uncanny ability to locate rare fungi. The cloud forest is a place where life thrives upon life, in seemingly endless layers. Epiphytes grow on trees, moss drapes everything, and the air itself feels alive with moisture and possibility. These forests are river makers. The cloud forest grows rivers, and rivers grow the forest. They exist in profound symbiotic relationship. Juliana Furci possesses an extraordinary gift. She can sense the presence of fungi before she sees them. She speaks of hearing them as a fuzz in the matrix, picking up particular vibrations in the background energy field. She insists there is dialogue. They know I'm there. Her talent has enabled her to locate many mushrooms previously unknown to Western mycology. But Juliana arrives grieving. Her father has recently died suddenly, and she feared death had drawn her power from her. On the first night in Los Cedros, Macfarlane notices her quietly crying in the shadows around the campfire. Yet she is also uplifted by the vital and vibrant energy of the river and forest. Being in their presence has bewildered her soul again. The aliveness of the place is healing her grief. The stakes here are existential. This glorious concatenation of rivers flowing from Los Cedros was under threat of total elimination from gold mining, a Canadian mining company working with the Ecuadorian state mining company and army planned to destroy it all. But here is where the revolutionary idea becomes real. In 2008, Ecuador ratified a new national constitution with Articles 71 to 74 granting rights to nature, recognizing Pachamama, Mother Earth, as a living entity with rights to exist, persist, regenerate, be restored, and be respected. This was the first national declaration of its kind in the world. In 2021, when the mining interests came for Los Cedros, the Constitutional Court used these rights of nature articles to save the forest and river. The ruling recognized the rights of the rivers to flow, the rights of the forest to grow, the fundamental rights of nature itself. The forest and its rivers were saved not because they are useful to humans, but because they have an inherent right to exist. This section reveals a profound truth. When we recognize other beings as alive, we begin to heal. Juliana's transformation mirrors the salvation of the forest. Both represent life persisting, regenerating, being respected. Part 3. Ghosts, Monsters, and Angels. The Wounded Rivers of Chennai, India. The second journey takes Macfarlane to the opposite extreme, rivers that have been murdered. In Chennai, southern India, 3 rivers, the Kosasthalaya, Kuum, and Adyar, flow from clear, life-filled headwaters described as an avian Venice, teeming with bee-eaters, golden plovers, and dragonflies. But as they approach the industrial city of Chennai, they become repositories of death. The pollution is almost incomprehensible. One river has, for miles at a time and months of the year, 0% dissolved oxygen and 0 species count. Heavy industry discharges directly into the waterways. Toxic fly ash pools where children play. The city authorities respond to the worst pollution by simply erasing those sections from environmental maps, making the rivers literally disappear from official records. Macfarlane's guide through this devastation is Yuvan Arves, an extraordinary young man who represents hope incarnate. Yuvan's story is itself a tale of resurrection. He grew up in a violent household, beaten weekly or daily by his stepfather. At 16, he fled to Pathashala, a Krishnamurti school where closeness to nature was an ethos. There, Yuvan underwent what he calls crystallization, his entire being reformatted through community and the wider living world. Snakes, paddy fields, bee-eaters. He taught himself the names of creatures and their relationships in an amazing act of autodidacticism and spiritual recovery. Rivers now run through Yuvan too. Water is what he both thinks and thinks with. Yuvan insists, crucially, that these rivers are not dead. They are grievously wounded. Life finds a way. He points out the mongoose breeding in sewers, the millipedes and detritivores turning waste into value, the snakes slipping into drains, the swallows and dragonflies that persist. tenacity of life energy still permeates the city. His work is to widen the circle of life, to bring water bodies back to life and bring the life of those marginalized by dead water back to life with them. His vision is profoundly democratically inclusive across species boundaries. As he says, barrenness is almost always a state of mind, only rarely a state of the land. The challenges are immense. India has a Hindu nationalist government highly hostile to environmental dissent, which gets castigated as anti-India, anti-development, even seditious or terrorist. Press freedom and freedom of speech are under enormous assault, yet young activists persist. One unforgettable night, Macfarlane joins volunteers walking the beach, rescuing Olive Ridley sea turtle eggs from among shards of funerary clay pots, charred sticks, human turds, and plastic bottles. It is a scene of birth and rebirth, as miraculous as anything in Britain's wild places. Macfarlane and Yuvan later co-write a ghazal, a Persian love poem, to the sea turtles, celebrating these night swimmers who have been coming through darkness for millions of years. This section embodies what Macfarlane identifies as a crucial principle. Hope is a discipline. It has one foot in fantasy, the dreaming of a world otherwise, a river alive again, and the other in work, in recognition of the labor, time, effort, and belief required to realize that fantasy. The young activists of Chennai practice this discipline daily. The connection between human rights and rights of nature becomes undeniable here. The poorest of Chennai have been systematically displaced, as industrial violence disproportionately occurs in their ecosystems. Their children play in toxic fly ash. One community member, when asked about hopes for the ecosystem's future, responds bitterly that it would be nice to just get asthma rather than cancer. Human well-being and river well-being are inseparable. Part 4. The Living River. The Mutahekau-Shippu, Quebec, Canada. The third and culminating journey is a 100-mile kayak descent of the Mutahekau-Shippu, known in English as the Magpie River in northeastern Quebec, deep in Nitassinan, the homeland of the Innu people. This river is spectacular, wild, and powerful. It crashes and slices through some of the oldest rock on Earth on its way to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Macfarlane and his small group, including his close friend Wayne Chambliss, Innu poet and language keeper Rita Mestacosho, and other companions, are dropped by float plane 11 days' travel and about 110 miles upstream. They must paddle out to reach the sea. Macfarlane's prose in this section becomes more fluid, more riverine. The relative remoteness of the setting allows for days without seeing anyone else. The river's physically and metaphysically intense permanent presence does something to him that he is still reckoning with. Driftwood forms an ossuary of water-worn river bones. The Mutahekau-Shippu is the only river in Quebec that has not been dammed for power generation. But Hydro-Quebec, the state power company, wants to dam it in 2021 in a groundbreaking campaign pioneered by both white settlers and Innu communities working together. The Magpie River was granted legal personhood, becoming the first river in Canada's history to have its rights declared. Innu activist Wapukun Mestacosho explains. Rivers are the veins of the territory. More than just waterways or resources, they are living beings with their own spirit and agency. This section explores the philosophical and practical implications of granting rivers legal rights. What does it mean for a river to have personhood? How do you know what a river wants? Who can speak for a river? What does a river say? The answers are not simple. Macfarlane openly wrestles with these questions rather than providing pat answers. He condemns the English language habit of using it for natural entities, a mode of address that reduces them to the status of stuff. Throughout the book, rivers are referred to as who, not which or that. The precedent comes partly from the famous 2017 Wanganui River case in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The Te Awa Tupua Act recognized the Wanganui River as a living being from the mountains to the sea, an indivisible whole rather than fragmentable, commodifiable elements. As Maori legal scholar Jacinta Ruru wrote, the legal personality concept aligns with the Maori understanding of a personified natural world. Paddling down the Mutehekau Shipu, experiencing its power, navigating its rapids, sleeping beside its voice, Macfarlane understands this viscerally. The river is not background. It is not resource. It is presence, agency, being. A who with its own life. Around the campfire at night, conversations deepen. Wayne Chambliss asks the essential questions. What kind of politics emerges from recognizing rivers as alive? How do we make the difficult moves from aesthetic and spiritual encounter through ethics to politics? These are not abstract philosophical puzzles, but urgent practical matters. The rights of nature movement is no silver bullet. It is full of pitfalls, traps, and philosophical problems. But at its best, it is what Macfarlane calls a legal grammar of animacy, an attempt to make power rhyme with perceptions of a living world. Part 5. Broader Themes and Implications. The Rights of Nature Movement. This book is simultaneously Macfarlane's most personal and most political work. He is explicitly aligned with the rights of nature movement, which has been gaining momentum globally. The concept is both ancient and revolutionary. Indigenous cultures worldwide have always understood lands and rivers as alive, not as belief or animism to be categorized by anthropologists, but as lived reality. For the Sarayaku people in the Ecuadorian Amazon, water, trees, humans, and creatures of the forest form a living, thinking being. The Western scientific worldview has treated this understanding as primitive superstition, but the rights of nature movement seeks to translate these ancient truths into modern legal frameworks. If corporations can have legal personhood, if they can be treated as entities with rights, why not rivers, which actually are alive? Since Ecuador's 2008 constitutional articles and New Zealand's 2017 Wanganui River Act, the movement has spread. Rivers, forests, and ecosystems in various jurisdictions have been granted legal standing. The implications are profound. These natural beings can now have representatives who speak for them in court, can sue polluters, can defend their right to exist. This isn't anthropomorphism, attributing human characteristics to non-human things. As Macfarlane writes, to call a river alive is not to personify a river, but instead further to deepen and widen the category of life. Words make world's language shapes reality. The way we speak about rivers determines how we treat them. When we call them natural resources or water assets, or refer to them as it, we reduce them to stuff to be used. When we ask, "Who are your waters?" or speak of a river who flows through the land, we acknowledge relationship and being. Macfarlane is attempting what urban planners call daylighting, bringing long-buried watercourses back to the surface, freeing imprisoned rivers. But he's doing it with ideas, bringing concepts of river life back into public consciousness. Grief, loss, and regeneration. A remarkable theme weaves through all three journeys. Each of Macfarlane's companions has recently lost someone. Juliana lost her father. Yuvan carries trauma from his childhood. Others grieve friends and family. Yet in the presence of living rivers, even dying ones, they find healing. The aliveness of rivers offers medicine for grief. There is something about encountering a being larger than yourself, older than you, continuing despite everything, that provides perspective and comfort. Rivers flow on. Life persists. This is not escapism or nature as therapy in a trivial sense. It is recognition that we are part of a larger community of life, that our individual losses are held within cycles of death and regeneration that are cosmic in scale. The crisis is real. Macfarlane doesn't shy from the magnitude of the crisis. Rivers globally face catastrophic threats from climate change, mining, pollution, damming, and over-extraction. The statistics are grim. The images from Chennai are horrifying. Yet this is not a book of despair. It is a book of good trouble, as civil rights activist John Lewis called it. The activists Macfarlane travels with know the odds. They do the work anyway. They practice hope as a discipline. As Yuvan demonstrates, recognizing that rivers are grievously wounded rather than dead changes everything. If they're wounded, they can heal. If given care, protection, time, and our recognition of their right to exist. Science and the sacred throughout, Macfarlane demonstrates deep respect for scientific knowledge. He cites geologists, hydrologists, mycologists, ecologists. He understands that scientific understanding of rivers, their hydrology, ecology, chemistry, is essential. But he also recognizes that scientific knowledge alone is insufficient. We need multiple ways of knowing. Indigenous knowledge systems that have sustained relationships with rivers for millennia have wisdom that Western science is only beginning to acknowledge. The mycologist Juliana sensing fungi through vibrations, Yuvan reading the life signs in polluted water, Innu elders understanding rivers as veins of the territory. These are forms of knowledge that complement and deepen scientific understanding. When geologist Harold Fiske created his famous 1944 maps showing the ancient meanders of the Mississippi River snaking across the landscape, he revealed something profound. At geological timescales, rivers very much seem alive. They move, change course, reshape the land. They are dynamic beings, not static features. What can we do? Near the end, Macfarlane reflects on actionable responses. He participated in the Big River Watch, a citizen science initiative where communities monitor the health of local rivers. Thousands of people become river guardians, gathering data, bearing witness, practicing love for their local waterways. The rise of citizen science and the river guardianship movement offers tremendous hope. When people connect with their rivers, seeing them, touching them, measuring their health, they begin to care. And we rarely love what we cannot see, touch, or feel. Local action matters. Global frameworks matter. Legal recognition matters. But most fundamentally, the shift in imagination matters. Once you see rivers as alive, you cannot unsee it. The question becomes not, is a river alive? But how do we live in right relationship with rivers who are alive? Conclusion. Becoming rivered. At the book's end, Macfarlane introduces a beautiful concept, being rivered. It means being transformed by rivers, shaped by them, becoming more fluid in your thinking and being. The book itself flows like a river, from springs, the chalk stream and introduction, through three major tributaries, Ecuador, India, Canada, with smaller flows in between, gathering force until it reaches an ocean of implications and possibilities. Macfarlane's son was right at the beginning. The answer to, is a river alive, is yes, of course. But recognizing this truth demands everything from us. New laws, new politics, new economics, new ways of speaking, new humility, and most of all, new old ways of being in relationship with the more than human world. The Innu people say that rivers are the veins of the territory. We might extend this. Rivers are the veins of the planet, the circulatory system of Earth itself. The water in rivers was once rain, was once ocean, was once clouds. It moves through the great hydrological cycle, connecting mountain peak to ocean depth, connecting all life. When we sit, we are ponds. When we walk or run, we are rivers. We are, ourselves, mostly water. The rivers flow through us as we flow through the landscape. Our fate has always flowed with that of rivers. We have just forgotten. This book is an act of remembering. It invites us to radical reimagining, not only of rivers, but of life itself. It shows us that the most revolutionary act might be the simplest: to recognize the aliveness of the world, to meet rivers as fellow beings, to practice the old new truth that everything is connected. As one young Ladakhi girl, living on the banks of the Indus, said when asked what rights her river has, "The river has a right to sing." When rivers are in good flow, they burble, they sing. The book ends with this hope, that we might restore that song, that we might listen to it, that we might harmonize with it, that we might remember we have always been part of the chorus. The revolution required is one of imagination, first, then law, then action. But it begins with a child's simple wisdom. Yes, of course a river is alive. Now let us live as if we believe it.